Okay, good evening, everybody. And because we have such a large crowd, I am forced to have to put this on. Hope nobody minds. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, no, this isn't going to work. Okay, now we have a nice size audience for coronavirus atmosphere. And we're going to try to do this virtually. You're not going to have access through the video to it, but the PowerPoint that we're going to be using was the end of last week's class. And it's available in the system, in Canvas, in the Canvas in your module of PowerPoints and Shiur. And I'll let you know what slide number we're up to, so you can go ahead and go through the PowerPoint together with us. We'll have all of that while we're giving the Shiur through YouTube. Okay, we were in the middle of the sugya of benefiting from Basar beChalav. We went through in the previous weeks the Isser. We went through the introduction, the Isser of the three type Isser of Basar beChalav of cooking, eating, and benefiting. We went through in detail the cooking prohibition. We went through in detail the eating prohibition last week, and we began last week in detail the benefiting prohibition. And thus far, what we said is that it's forbidden to benefit, meaning you can't sell Basar beChalav, meaning a mixture, a meat and milk which have mixed together in a prohibitive way. They've been cooked together, is forbidden to benefit from, so you can't use it on your body for a purpose, you cannot use it as medicine, you cannot sell it to another, and we discussed in detail regarding what you do with the paths, and we're not going to go into that again, but that's all review from the previous week. So we're going to continue right what we were up to, and I believe we were up to animal food. Any objections? Animal food it is. Okay, that's what we were up to. You can look at slide 8. In slide 8 of the PowerPoint, okay, it discusses animal foods and things that people have to be aware. So actually, this is where learn a theoretical law, but just not get the proper translation of what that means to his life, or what that means in practicality. And that's really the purpose of our course, is not just to learn the theoretical law, but to translate that into things that we do in our daily lives that may be affected. Many people have pets throughout the world, especially in America, the American dream, right? A wife, 2 kids, and a dog. And people buy pet food. People don't even realize, but there's a number of adherences that you must abide by regarding pet food in order so you don't transgress the Isser of Basar beChalav. So we discussed that we did mention this last week, that it's forbidden to serve meat and milk. Meaning Basar beChalav, meat that's been cooked with milk, to your pet, because you're not allowed to benefit from it, so therefore you cannot feed it to your pet. This prohibition applies, the Achreinim it's brought in the Taz, and other places. The whole list is brought on page 35 in the book, so that's where we are in the book for everyone who has a book in front of them, page 35, that it applies even to an animal who is hefker, meaning disowned. The Isser of feeding Basar beChalav, which is a Isser Hana food, a food that's prohibited in benefit, isn't only when you receive direct benefit. My pet was supposed to eat a meal, and instead of me giving him a meal which would cost me money, I gave him this prohibited and benefit mixture of meat and milk. So I saved myself a meal by giving him this. Not only is that case for certain forbidden because you're benefiting, but even if I'm feeding someone else's dog, and even if I'm feeding a dog of the wild, of the forest, a forest animal, it's prohibited. Why? What's the reason? What's the benefit here? So the reason that's explained is because, so writes the Mishnah Berurah regarding chametz, as this prohibition of benefit we also find regarding chametz on Pesach that you can't benefit from, and there too you can't feed chametz on Pesach even to a disowned animal. So if I see, a box of crackers next to the garbage and I see a cat trying to get into it, I'm not allowed to help. I'm not allowed to help the cat enter into that box so he can eat the chametz. Why? What benefit? Says the Mishnah Berurah, some interesting psychological pleasure and satisfaction that one receives from this. He writes, as one receives mental and emotional satisfaction by satiating an animal's hunger. The idea of animals' rights is not just something, a slogan, a nice slogan for people who want to feel good about themselves, that they're standing up for other people, standing up for animals. But it's a real psychological aspect that we have inside of our minds, that we feel bad. We feel bad for animals we feel mercy. We feel mercy for people in need and animals in need. And it's a real human trait and a real human emotion. And that emotion gets quenched when you then feed the animal. So it has nothing to do with whether you own the animal. When you own the animal, you're receiving monetary benefit. But even if you don't own the animal, you're receiving emotional and psychological benefit. And therefore, it would be under the prohibition of feeding them basar v'chalav. So to summarize, the prohibition to feed basar v'chalav to an animal applies to all animals in existence. Okay, there's no heter to feed it to any animal. Now let's talk about pet food and one's pets. So, in the Shulchan Aruch, we find a discussion regarding feeding milk and meat water, meaning dishwashing water of meat and milk to animals. Did we do this last week? Do you remember doing this last week? I don't remember doing. I don't know. We didn't do this. Okay. So it's as follows. The Ramah brings. This is in chapter 87, halacha 6. In the Ramah, in your book, it's on page 31. Again, we are on slide 8 of the slideshow. The Ramah writes that some poskim rule that one may not mix water used to wash meat vessels with water used to wash dairy vessels, and then feed it to one's animal, being that the mixture is forbidden in benefit. Now, let me explain the case. Back in the day, they used to wash dishes in pots that were on fires. So the milk dishes were in the milk pot, the meat dishes were in the meat pot, and now no one's drinking this water. It's not a soup, it's going to the garbage. So some had this idea, well, instead of me throwing it in the garbage, I'll spill the milk pot water, dirty milk pot water, into the dog bowl, and I'll also spill the meat pot water into the dog bowl, and then we have a mixture of meat and milk. So some poskim say that is forbidden to be done. Now, why is it only some poskim? Seemingly everybody should agree that this is forbidden to be done, as it's cooking hot with hot, klirishin, it cooks together, and it should be a clear state of basar v'chalav. So why is it only some poskim? So this is really a question on the Ramah, and bottom line is as follows. If both of them were actually sitting on the klirishin, on the fire, then 100% it's forbidden for you to pour both of them into the same, for you to mix them together and then give it to the animal as you just created basar v'chalav. So that's clearly prohibited, and there's nobody who permits that. Where the case becomes a little more lenient, and even in that case, the Ramah saying you should be stringent, is in the case where there isn't a mixture of a klirishin taking place. And therefore, technically, the mixture is not prohibited in benefit. Such as, for example, if I poured the hot milk water, meaning the hot dish water that's in the milk pot that cleaned all the milk dishes, I poured that first into a vessel. Now it became a klisheni. We are going to learn that according to most poskim, Ramah included, klisheni can't cook. Now, if I go ahead and then take the klirishin water of the meat dirty dishes, and I pour that into another vessel, and only after they're both in the klisheni, I mix them together, technically, there's no basar v'chalav here, and therefore there's no prohibition in benefit, and therefore I can feed it to my dog. The chiddush of the Ramah is that some places can hold that even in such a case you shouldn't do it. And the reason is because you allow this to happen, people may then mix with a klirishin or iri-klirishin, and therefore it's better not to do so, even though the Ramah later says that one who is lenient does not lose out. In other words, the Ramah on this stringency concludes that you don't have to follow this chumrah, this opinion, and you're allowed to be lenient. But what case is it talking about? So that, as we explained and clarified, it's only a case of where it's being mixed after it's been poured in separate bowls, not if it mixed in the klirishin itself in the original pot. So on the fires, that would be a clear case of basar v'chalav, which would be prohibited in benefit. Furthermore, this case would include even if it's cold. Let's say I wash dishes with water that's less than yad seledes. So I'm using warm water. It doesn't have the ability to cook. in such a case, technically, even in Clearishan, there's no cooking taking place because it's not hot enough to cook. So technically, there's no Basar beChalav. It's cold with cold, and there's no Isser and benefit. Here too, some places are more stringent. Why? In order so you don't come to do it in actual Clearishan with hot water and transgress Basar beChalav. But nonetheless, Minadin, you're allowed to be lenient, and those who are lenient do not lose out, as conclude the Rabbi. Okay. Using that information, let us now analyze buying pet food. Okay? So clearly we learned from that there is a major issue with feeding pet food, with feeding Basar beChalav pet food to your pet, as we just discussed in length regarding this dishwater. If even dishwater, which is not human food, we've applied a regulation and a chumrah, even when it's cold, to not feed it to your pet, then certainly, if it's a biblical prohibition of Basar beChalav, would it be prohibited min HaTorah to feed it to your pet? So practically based on this, when you buy pet food, you don't have to make sure that it's kosher for Jewish consumption. You don't have to make sure it's kosher for a Jew to eat. It doesn't need to have a hashgacha for Yidden to be allowed to eat. I'm allowed to feed my dog non-kosher food. Okay? You're allowed to feed your dog any non-kosher food you want, with one exception: foods that are prohibited in benefit, which would include Basar beChalav. So if I see on the aisle a feed me pack for dogs made by High Life, and it says in it beef and cheese. Beef usually connotes animal meat such as cow, not pork, but cow, while cheese is cheese, coming from a domestic animal, which usually are kosher, and the milks usually come from a cow or a goat. So when they have that listing on their package, they are in essence publicizing to you, this dish is delicious for animals, is inedible for humans, but is Basar beChalav. It's Basar beChalav, and even though it's not edible for humans, it still contains a Basar beChalav prohibition, as we learned from the dishwater case in the Ramah, and therefore would be biblically forbidden to purchase it, and biblically forbidden to feed it to an animal. Even if you were given it for free you were given this pack, you're not allowed to feed it to an animal. As it has nothing to do, we discussed this in the past, the prohibition of benefit doesn't only apply when you created the Basar beChalav. It doesn't matter who created the Basar beChalav. You cannot arrange benefit from it. So therefore, you have to be very careful when buying food for a pet, that you look at the ingredients and make sure that it does not contain Basar beChalav ingredients. Now, to do this, you have to understand the labels and ingredients of pet food. I'm going to read what we wrote here in the article. While in many cases the meat or dairy ingredient is clearly labeled on the ingredient list, at other times it is obscure. Not everyone understands ingredients properly. You have to be in the food market to understand the labels of ingredients and what they are referring to. For example, if the label states meat as an ingredient, its source could be from kosher animals, such as cattle, sheep, or goats, in which case it is forbidden to be cooked with dairy, or maybe from pork. It's not clear. Now we will learn, as we're going to go through this chapter, that not all meat and dairy ingredients combine to perform a biblical Basar beChalav prohibition. For example, we will learn that chicken with milk is only rabbinical. So, and pork is, even though it's not kosher, it's not a biblical meat that creates biblical Basar beChalav. So if that was their intent of meat, really they meant chicken, or really they meant pork, in truth, there is no biblical Basar beChalav prohibition taking place in this pet food, which would mean, in truth, you can buy it and feed it to your animal. As we will learn today, Meretz Hashem, there is no isser of benefiting from rabbinically prohibited mixtures of Basar beChalav. You don't have to write that down now. We're going to learn that later on. But just to know that now we're discussing the pet food case, there would be a clear distinction between the different meat ingredients that are in this pet food. Now, the same thing applies regarding milk. Regarding dairy ingredients, casein and whey are considered milk. So if you see that in the ingredients, some people may not even recognize that is a dairy ingredient, when in truth it's a dairy ingredient. And if they also have beef there, which could be sourced from kosher animals, then it would be a biblical Basar beChalav prohibition and be prohibited for you to buy. It is for this reason that we find today on the market pet foods with hashgachas, and the hashgacha is not there to say you can also eat it. You can eat together with your pet. No, it's not kosher for human consumption. only for the animal. It's kosher for the animal, meaning it doesn't contain basar v'challah, so you, the owner, can buy it, and you, the owner, can feed it to him. Otherwise, you have to be very careful to look into the ingredients and see what it contains. So we have here in the picture a Friskies Tasty Treasures for cats. It says here that in the can it contains turkey and chicken dinner with cheese. There would be no prohibition on buying this for your pet, as although it's certainly basar v'challah, but that, as we will learn, is a rabbinical mixture of basar v'challah, to which the benefit prohibition does not apply, and therefore you would be allowed to purchase and feed such food to your pet. Okay, for any more information on the pet food, you're welcome to read the article. It's on page, as we said, page 35. Okay, but pretty much I believe we covered it, and we're going to move on to the next slide, slide 9. Shampoo and lotions of basar v'challah. This is an interesting topic. In the book, you can find a discussion on this on page in the book, it's on page 32. On page 32, we have the discussion about this, and it's actually found in the Ramah. What you see right there is it looks like a aisle of a grocery store, of a supermarket, prior to the coronavirus outbreak, because now those are all empty. There's nothing there by now. But that's what used to be there for everyone to remember on the aisles, those type of things. So the question is, shampoo and lotions, do they have a worry of basar v'challah prohibition? And is that why we see some of these products containing hashgacha? Is that the reason? Do they need a hashgacha? What's the deal? So here too, the Ramah brings in chapter 87, halacha 6, as follows: that some poskim rule that the vessel which is used to heat up water for bathing the head, meaning shampoo, the vessel that's used to make shampoo, is not to be used for washing dishes, as the shampoo is made with ash of the oven. Meaning, how would they make the shampoo? They would take ash from the oven, and the ash, of course, was from meat that cooked there, was from milk that cooked there, and they would then add it into the water and create the shampoo mixture. So he says you can't use that for washing dishes, as is basar v'challah. So, first of all, let's just deal with the case itself. The case itself seems to be saying that to use the shampoo alone is okay. That's fine. What we can't do is use it for washing dishes. Why? As if you use it for washing dishes, the dishes will become non-kosher. And then when you cook on those dishes or eat on those dishes, the dishes will give off non-kosher taste to your food. However, to use it on your body is not a problem. Why? If it's not kosher, it should be not kosher at all. And here too, the Ramah concludes that this is only a mere stringency, meaning not only is using the shampoo allowed, but even what we said is not allowed, which is the using this mixture to wash your dishes, meaning it's like soap for washing dishes, even that is only a stringency. And those who are lenient have not lost out, and we have to understand why. So in the Ramah itself, it's not clear, and it's a very strong question in the Ramah. Why is there a leniency here? And some give the following explanations. Say the following. This is discussing someone who has taken, not the ash of basar v'chalav, as once meat has become ash, it can't make basar v'chalav with milk that became ash. Ash of milk, ash of meat don't make basar v'chalav. They're both inedibles and no longer food. So we are really discussing a fireplace, okay? You cooked in the fireplace, and the person just went and he grabbed all of that ember after it was, extinguished, together with all of the pieces of food that got thrown there, which includes pieces of cheese and pieces of meat, and he threw that into the shampoo pot to make the shampoo. So now we have fresh pieces of meat, fresh pieces of milk, with a lot of ash being cooked down in this pot. Why is that not basar v'chalav? So the Achreinim explain, or Hashulchan explains that since there's ash involved, the ash gives off a blemished taste to the water, which causes the mixture of meat and milk to be blemished, which is nice and Talmud Pagam, which really makes it not a biblical mixture. In other words, we're going to learn a rule, and this is a rule really taken from Tarufis. It's not really doesn't really belong in this subject of Basar beChalav. It's a general rule in Kashrus and laws of Tarufis. There's a whole siman on it, but nonetheless, we need to borrow it to understand this, which is as follows: that the Torah only prohibited non-kosher foods that taste good. Now, it doesn't mean if you found out that there's a cheeseburger that tastes horrible, you're allowed to eat it. God forbid. That's not the intent. The intent is that in a mixture where one is giving off taste to another, if it gives off a bad taste to the other food, if a non-kosher food is giving a bad taste to kosher food, then the Torah doesn't view that taste as taste. So for Basar beChalav to be joined together and come in Isser, we need their taste to join. If their taste have become blemished due to something external, such as ash, it prevents them from bonding, and thereby prevents them from being able to become a biblical mixture of Basar beChalav, and therefore technically it's mutter. So therefore, for sure you're allowed to use this as shampoo, as there's no Isser of benefit here, there's no real mixture of Basar beChalav. And even to use it to wash your dishes is mutter, because so what if it gets absorbed in your dishes? It's a blemished taste, and nonetheless it's a chomer not to do so, as that ends up getting into your food, and then you end up eating it, which is a little more severe. So that's why we are stringent lechatchila, or at least some places should be stringent lechatchila, not to do so. Other reasons are also brought down. You can look at footnote 68 that explains other reasons of why this is a mere chumrah and not me'ikar adin. But let's clarify the case, okay? Nobody should learn from this case of the shampoo that there's an all-out heter for cosmetics and lotions and shampoos to contain Basar beChalav ingredients. That is clearly not the case. That is a very specific case that the Ramah is referring to, of where there are other reasons of heter which really make the mixture not be considered Basar beChalav. And therefore, the entire case is a mere stringency. But in the case where there would be a real worry, a real prohibition of Basar beChalav, then indeed the shampoo would be prohibited. So let's summarize the case of shampoo and cosmetics. If in the pot cooking all the inedible ingredients of the lotion and shampoo, they threw in a piece of meat and they threw in a piece of cheese as part of the ingredients, since the shampoo is a blemished ingredient, it's exactly similar to the case of the Ramah, where we're discussing pieces of meat, pieces of milk, cooking together with ash, which is a blemished ingredient, in which we said, even the chatchila, you can use the shampoo, just don't eat it. Don't wash your dishes with it. So in such a case, if we if we were asked by a company, a Lotion Johnson has asked us to come over and then check out all of their products to give a hashgacha, and we see them throwing cheese and then they threw meat. It's all kosher. You can put your OK and OU stamp on it. Why? Because as we said before, there is a blemished ingredient there first. However, if you go to the plant to do your observation and you see a pot full of shampoo ingredients and a pot next to it with the meat and milk being sauteed together, and then they spill that into the shampoo lotion, then we have a major problem. As they first created the prohibition of Basar beChalav without any blemished ingredient, and only then spilled it into the lotion, in such a case, it would be prohibited biblically to benefit from these lotions, and they are all strictly not kosher, biblically not kosher to use, even though you're not eating them, as they contain a benefit prohibition. Any questions? Huh? I was once asked this shaila in real life. Somebody asked me, they found a special type of shampoo that contained whey and contained meat ingredients, animal meat ingredients. It was very strange. I never thought of such a thing before that would happen, but this was the question that I was sent. by the individual. And the way I answered was the way I explained right now. I said it would really be dependent on how they do it. If they first mix the meat and milk ingredient together in their pure edible states and create a basar v'chalav prohibition, then put in the shampoo is biblically forbidden in benefit. But if they don't, then it would be mutter, just like we said over here regarding the shampoo in the Ramah's case. So it would really need an investigation to the company to see how this is made.
But not to wash dishes with it.
Well, yes, it would be a chumrah not to wash dishes with it. So yeah, that we can already learn. If you ever see a soap bottle, dish soap bottle that says on it whey and animal products, then don't wash your dishes with it. But that's not why they have hashgachas on soaps. They have hashgachas on soaps for, number one, economic reasons. It helps give mashgichim and hashgacha companies more parnusa. You can get more parnasa. And number two, it's a hitter. It's a nice thing. We like having everything with a hashgacha. It sounds better. But technically, of course, it doesn't need a hashgacha unless we have this unless we have a real concrete worry of infiltration of meat and milk.
They generally don't do it that way. They wouldn't do it the prohibited way in general. They just wouldn't. They wouldn't make the basar v'chalav first.
I have no idea how they make shampoo or lotions. They have all their secrets, trade secrets.
You know what you're saying? We should. We gotta know.
We gotta know. Yeah, but there's no real reason to suspect. That's the whole thing. In kashrus, you don't have to start suspecting for every detail, okay? Only when a product has a raised suspicion do you have to start getting worried and going down and investigating. But so long as there's no real worry, you don't have to worry, and it doesn't need a hashgacha min adin. For example, today it's common for tea bags and coffee, ground coffee, to contain muhadrin hashgachas. As I've personally been told by those hashgachas, they've never stepped foot in those plants. Why? Because there's no need to. There's no worry that there's infiltration in those products. The way it's made is the way it's made for many generations. They keep it pure. They don't want anything to infiltrate. There's no worry. So they're giving the hashgacha so people know that it's kosher, but there's no real concrete worry. And therefore, they don't have to have a mashgiach go to the coffee plant or the tea plant to see how it's made.
You see the place on the screen when people ask questions? You see where comments and questions come up on the screen?
I'm looking right now. Nobody so far wrote any comments. There's a live chat. Anyone who wants to send in a question, please. We have the live chat ability here. You can type something, and you can just say hello, so I see that you're here also. And that's also nice. Anyone want to say hello? Just type hello. Nobody? Okay, well, I say hello. Okay, we'll continue with our next slide. Move slide down to slide 10, okay, second to last slide here on our PowerPoint, dealing with what seems to be sliding, unfortunately, way too much nowadays, the stocks. Owning stocks in basar v'chalav companies. So anyone who still has any stocks left in the stock market, I would have wished to discuss this last week, or have been a little more practical. In any event, should have refuah shlema, come back to its great pride and position. Everyone should make a lot of money, but our question here is as follows. May one invest in stocks that are part of companies, meaning buy stocks in a company that cooks and markets and sells basar v'chalav products? For example, if you invest in a stock portfolio that contains the fast food industry, it includes many restaurants, seafood, and one of them is Burger King. Burger King is not only not a kosher restaurant, but it's a restaurant that serves and makes money and profits off biblical basar v'chalav, as does McDonald's and many, many, many others. Can you own stocks in such areas? Now, even those people who think, hey, I don't own stocks anyway, this is so irrelevant to me, this whole discussion. Believe it or not, you don't even know it, you own stocks, and I'll explain. Almost all people in today's world, when they work, and they work for an employer, the employer opens up for them a pension plan. That pension plan usually has with it an investment plan as well. So they usually hire an investment company that takes care of your pension. So your pension grows, right? They separate your pension monthly or whatever it is, and your pension grows throughout the years until you're able to take it out. And the people investing your money may be investing it in these stocks. We know here in Israel that's how it works. People that have their pension separated, they go into these pension companies such as Migdal or Harel, and they have workers that are in charge of investing your pension. It's so in order so it grows, and they invest it in the stock market. You have no clue, but very likely they're probably investing whatever can profit, including the food industry, which can include and most likely include industries that produce and market and sell and profit from Basar beChalav, biblical Basar beChalav foods. So the question is, what do we do? If this were to be a problem, we would basically not be allowed to have our pension run in a stock portfolio. We would have to just let it sit in the bank or invest it ourselves. We would not be able to have somebody invest it, wherever he wants. So is this a problem? So what we have to clarify here is, what is the concept of a stock? If I were to say that owning a stock is equivalent to owning a percentage of a company, then seemingly it would be absolutely prohibited, because you're a partial owner. And by being a partial owner, you're being a partial benefactor of the sales, which is a clear prohibition of Basar beChalav, a biblical prohibition of Basar beChalav. And you don't even know this is going on. You don't know, you never even knew you owned stocks. And now you know you own stocks because your pension was invested in stocks for the last 30 years. On the other hand, perhaps stocks is not considered ownership. Perhaps stocks is rather considered money that we lend the company. What's the whole idea of the stock market? A company opens up small. They have two stores, everything's being run privately, private owner, etc. They now want to expand. They saw they're very successful, they want to expand, they want to open up 10 stores or 50 stores. They don't have the capital to do that. Where are they going to get the capital to open up 50 stores? So what do? They put their company in the public market. People see they have a good name, they start buying shares, meaning buying portions in the company. You sell the shares, you get the money that they pay you for the shares, and you reinvest that back into your company. And your company can then open the 50 stores. And the 50 can then open 100 stores, and then open 200, et cetera, until you have a multi-billion-dollar business. One way of looking at it is like the former approach, that all the stockholders are partial owners. So even though I started this company, and I'm the one who put it in the public market, right? It's as if I sold it. If I start a company and I sold it to somebody else, it's no longer mine. Well, so do here. I basically cut it up to 1 million different pieces, which are called stocks. And I've sold each one of those pieces to individuals. So I'm a partial owner, and they're a partial owner, and it would be forbidden for any of us, if we're Jewish, to benefit from Basar beChalav products. On the other hand, perhaps we can say, no, this is just a game. It's just a make-believe that they're partial owners. Can they walk in, if you own a stock in Burger King, can you walk into Burger King and start giving people instructions? I'm an owner, do you know who I am? I own a stock here. They'll knock you right out of the store. Who are you? What are you doing? So what if you own a stock? It means absolutely nothing. In the eyes of the business world, owning a stock is viewed as somebody who lent money to the company. And the company uses that money to build itself, hopefully. They don't run away with it. They use it to invest it back into the company to build it up. And in exchange, they basically give you a worth of the company that you can then sell out and get a larger fare for your money. In other words, it's like lending money for interest. That's really what it is. You really have no say here in the company. You're a nobody, and you have no influence. So it's not considered ownership. Bottom line, these two approaches have been debated throughout the last 50, 70 years amongst the Gentile HaPoskim. Some Poskim view stocks as ownership, as the first approach. It's considered like you're a partial owner in the company. And therefore, it would be absolutely forbidden to have a stock portfolio in the food market, unless you make sure it is cleared and cleaned from any markets that sell and benefit and profit from Basar beChalav products such as McDonald's, Burger King, and the like. So is the ruling of the Minchas Yitzchak, and so is also the ruling of the Rebbe. A lot of Lubavitchers don't know this. The Rebbe's position was, the Rebbe's viewpoint was, a stock is not is not a loan. A stock is ownership. Even a single stock makes one a partner, and hence, if you own even one stock in a Basar beChalav company, according to that approach, the person transgresses Basar beChalav because he's benefiting from Basar beChalav. That's assuming that the stocks go up. If the stocks go down, then you haven't really benefited anything. But nonetheless, we all invest in order so go up. So that's what we're striving for. We're not trying to give tzedakah to the Burger King. Other places, however, such as the Igros Moshe and others, ruled that no, you're loaning money to the company. You're a nobody. You have no say. It's not considered ownership. And therefore, they said there's no transgression at all involved in having a stock portfolio in the food industry that may have stocks purchased into these Basar beChalav companies. Bottom line, what do? Everyone should speak to their Rav. Lately, the Eida Charedis has opened a branch of their hashgacha to clarify this aspect of investments, of stocks, and especially, as I said before, about pension plans and investment of the pensions in order so they are, in other words, they have the people who are an expert in business who work with their hashgacha to put together a portfolio of stock companies that are completely cleared of any asern, including Basar beChalav, and that's where religious people would invest, have their pensions go into. So, for example, they, let's say, work with Harel, insurance company, and Harel pension. So they also work with pensions. So they'll tell Harel, listen, we want to offer you the ability to have these kosher stock options, where religious people can choose to have their pension funds invested into the kosher stocks. So that's something that's available today. People are able to do it. In America, I don't know if it exists, but certainly here in Israel, there is that availability, and it's a growing market in order so people can avoid this machlekes. But most people, seemingly either due to lack of knowledge or just due to difficulty, follow the leading approach of Moshe Feinstein and just don't pay attention as they claim it's not considered ownership, it's just considered a loan.
The non-kosher food in general is not Basar beChalav, that because it's not a benefit, not an issue with benefiting.
Yehud is asking regarding non-kosher food. Well, forget about Basar beChalav. What about in general non-kosher food? You can own non-kosher food. You're not allowed to own non-kosher food, but that would be a rabbinical prohibition. And this machlekes would then be a machlekes over a rabbinical prohibition, which you can be more lenient on. But
you can benefit from it.
well, no, you can't benefit you can't arrange benefit. You can benefit if it happened. Somebody happened to drop in my pocket a piece of non-kosher meat. That's how I can sell it. But I can't do business initially with non-kosher meat. So to here, but it's a machlekes. So in a case of rabbinical prohibition with a dispute, there's more room to be lenient. But Basar beChalav is biblical. It's not rabbinical, it's biblical. Basar beChalav prohibition of benefit. So it's a lot more severe. So as we said, everybody should speak to the Rav regarding what to do. As I said, the Rebbe made his position clear in Rishimis. I don't know why it's not very well known or consulted by Rabbanim to completely avoid, even those who are Chabad Chassidim. To clarify, all the above is referring to a non-active shareholder, what's called a limited shareholder. As I said before, there are nobody in the company, somebody who owns enough stock to hold some power rights within the company. Obviously, according to all opinions, he is clearly an owner. He is not a lender, and it would be biblically forbidden for him to own these companies. So, for example, if somebody's father owned a business of Basar beChalav, wasn't from, and he passed away and he left an inheritance, the business is an inheritance to all of his children, including his religious son. The religious son would unfortunately not be allowed to benefit from this inheritance. He would not be allowed to sell the shares of the company to make money, as his father was an owner. Now he's an owner and he can't benefit from his ownership. So what he would need to do is he would need to work something out with his siblings and speak to a Rav how to do it in a kosher way to circumvent entering this prohibition. Let's move on from stocks to something else. The last slide here on the PowerPoint, slide 11.
Disappear. Oh.
Okay, we're going to do some more questions and answers regarding business with Basar beChalav, and let's now discuss a shaila I once received from somebody. I publicized the halach and the halacha about the isser of feeding your pet the pet food that contains meat and milk, as we discussed earlier, the cases that are prohibited, the cases that are permitted, if it's such as chicken. So we asked, what do? I actually work as a supplier for pet food. I supply pet food to stores. I don't feed them to my animals. I don't have any animals. I make money off of them. So am I allowed to do so? So it's really dependent on what he does. If, as a distributor, all he is doing is being a UPS messenger, meaning that he orders from the company, the company receives orders, and the orders are sent through him to deliver to the stores, then he has not, in such a case, he has no ownership over the pet food that contains Basar beChalav, and he's not directly benefiting from it. He's not the one selling them or buying them directly. However, in the event, as it is often with suppliers, that he is basically purchasing a whole stock of pet food from the company and then redistributing it, meaning selling it to the stores, and so he's a middleman, which is purchasing the food, then this would be a biblical prohibition of Basar beChalav, and he would only be allowed to work with pet foods that do not contain the milk and meat from the kosher domestic animals, which contain a biblical Basar beChalav prohibition. This is aside from the fact that there may be a rabbinical prohibition here involved of doing business with non-kosher food. We discussed in the previous class that, we mentioned it earlier before, that aside from the prohibition to benefit from Basar beChalav, there's a rabbinical prohibition to do business with any non-kosher food. Meaning you're not allowed to purposely get into a business with non-kosher food, even if it's not Basar beChalav. So I can't run a seafood restaurant that sells crab, for example. I can't own such a restaurant. And so the question here is, okay, I understand by Basar beChalav for you to purchase that from a company and then distribute it as a supplier to stores is absolutely forbidden because you're buying Basar beChalav and then benefiting from it. What about regular non-kosher food? Let's say it's a chicken cheese pet food, which is mutter b'natan Basar beChalav, but is there a benefiting prohibition? Sorry, a business prohibition here because now do business with non-kosher food. So Rabbi finds me here as a chiddush in which he rules that the issur of doing business with non-kosher food is only if the food is edible for humans. Only if the food is edible to humans. If it's animal food, there's no issur of business, says Rabbi. So therefore, he holds that you're allowed to be a supplier of pet food, non-kosher pet food. There's no business prohibition here, even though you're initially going to the companies and buying from them huge amounts and then distributing them for a higher price so you make money. Nonetheless, since it's not edible for humans, there's no business prohibition here, which would in any event only be rabbinical, even if there would be. However, the Basar beChalav prohibition, which is biblical, would apply, and therefore, as I said before, the supplier would have to make sure he doesn't purchase any pet food that contains biblical meat and biblical milk. Next question. I run a rental car company. How on earth can a rental car company owner enter into a shaila of benefiting from Basar beChalav? I'll explain. A local McDonald's comes over to me with urgency and says, the President of the United States just ordered 1,000 Mac burgers from me, and we need a huge truck, a huge car to deliver it. Can you provide us the truck? Well, by me renting him my car, which I own, I'm the owner of the company, I am, so to say, benefiting from Basar beChalav because he's renting it for the purpose of delivering Basar beChalav, and that's why he's giving me the money in order to do this. If I have a sign inside this car that says no food allowed, he wouldn't rent it from me. So it's only because I'm allowing him to transport this food that he's agreeing to pay me the money. So in essence, I am making money off, I'm benefiting from Basar beChalav. This is the question. Is it allowed or not allowed? So this is actually recorded regarding the laws of Chametz in chapter 450 in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. And there he writes the following regarding the transportation system at the time, which was a donkey. And he says, this is on page 36 in the book, it is forbidden to rent a donkey or a room for storage to a guy for the sake of him transporting or storing biblical, there's talking about chametz, but in our case it would be biblical basar v'chalav. In other words, this is viewed as a form of benefit, as making money off of it, and therefore would be under the prohibition. So, if the guy working at McDonald's comes and simply asks, can I rent a big car that can hold a lot of stuff in the back? I don't have to start interrogating him and asking, well, what is it for? And he tells me, well, we have all these Mac burgers, then it's ready to go. If you don't know what it's for, it's mutter. The prohibition only applies if you know explicitly it's being rented for the purpose of delivering or storing the basar beChalav food. Otherwise, if you just ask plainly, can I rent the car? Can I rent the room? It is not a problem at all. But if the manager of McDonald's comes over to you and says, we would like to store 1,000 frozen Mac burgers already made, basar beChalav, in your rental company's commercial freezers, can we do so? So you run a freezer, a freezer storage company. Then the answer would be no, you cannot. It would be usher to do that. You would not allowed to rent them out and work with them if it's basar beChalav food. However, so long as they're just asking to rent the space, and McDonald's goes, can we rent the space? Maybe they're doing it to store their burgers or their cheese. Who says it's basar beChalav? Who says it's after the fact that they've been cooked? In that case, it would be allowed. Now, next question. We'll deal with Gentile employees. It's on page 37. Are you allowed to give basar beChalav food to a live-in maid? For example, if I have a live-in maid and can I give her money to buy a sandwich at McDonald's? So the answer is that one may not do so unless certain conditions are fulfilled. But in general, one is not allowed to provide a Gentile employee with basar beChalav foods, as it's considered that you are benefiting from. We already said earlier, you're not allowed to even give a goy, an animal, basar beChalav food directly. It's considered a benefit. So too, you are not allowed to provide a Gentile with basar beChalav foods unless it's done in the following way. This is based on halacha regarding chametz. Can you give chametz to a Gentile employee during Pesach? So those rules that are written originally regarding chametz apply likewise towards basar beChalav. And it's explained as follows. I am allowed to give the guy, the non-Jewish employee money, lunch money, without mentioning to them what they should use it for. If they choose to then take it and buy meat and milk, basar beChalav, that's not my problem. That's not my problem. It would be allowed. Likewise, if I tell them, buy whatever you want and I'll pay you back later, show me a receipt and I'll include it in your salary at the end of the month, that's also fine because I have not purchased him any food. He purchased for himself and then it became a loan and I paid him back the loan. The one case that would be prohibited would be for me to give him the money and tell him, go to McDonald's, go to Burger King. That would be a prohibited case. Because he's using my money that I gave him to purchase it, which really is me purchasing it, and I'm then feeding it to the guy. Which leads us to the following heter. If my employee wants to have a business lunch with a potential client, and they would like to go to a fancy schmancy restaurant that serves basar beChalav, what do? Well, fancy schmancy restaurants are not fast food restaurants. They don't take money when you order. They wait till you're done eating, and then they give you the big fat bill together with a request for a tip. So by the time that you need to pay, the Basar beChalav has already disappeared in your stomach. So you, the owner, have never actually owned it. You only considered the owner of Basar beChalav once it's paid for. And you're not paying for it until after the employee eats it. So therefore, in such a case, it's not considered that you're an owner. So the only case it would be prohibited would be by a fast food restaurant, where I provide him money, and he then pays right away and gets his fast food meal of Basar beChalav, then it would be forbidden for the Jewish employer to do that. And therefore, the simple way of avoiding this, to make it very simple, is the employer should give him lunch money and don't tell him where to go. Let him go wherever he wants. Okay. Regarding a business credit card, so this is a little more complex. As in essence, what's happening is as follows. If I give the employee the business credit card to use, and he's paying for it, he's using it before he eats the food, do I consider it that I have purchased the meal and now I'm feeding it to him, and therefore would be prohibited? Or do I consider it that the credit card company has purchased the meal, and now I have to pay back the credit card company? So it's not, I left this in question on page 38, which concludes the section of benefit of Basar beChalav that we started last week. For more information, you can just read through some of these questions. You can comment on it in the Canvas system. There's some interesting cases. If you have any questions on them, things weren't clear, please read through the article and footnotes and relate to me any questions you may still have. If you can think of more questions, practical questions, I'd be very delighted. I can enter it into a new edition of the book. These practical questions in the business world are important and they're relevant. And if you can think of others, let us know. Okay, in Halacha 2, we don't have a PowerPoint for this. I didn't create it yet. But in Halacha 2 on page 38, we begin going into the rabbinical prohibitions of Basar beChalav. And I want to at least begin this today. And that is as follows. Until now, what we have discussed are the biblical prohibitions, meaning the prohibitions applicable to a biblical mixture of Basar beChalav. We've already mentioned many times, there are biblical mixtures and there are rabbinical mixtures, and they have different laws. So biblical mixtures retain the three big prohibitions of cooking, eating, and benefiting. What about rabbinical mixtures? For example, just for everybody to know an example, chicken and cheese, okay? Rabbinical prohibition of Basar beChalav, what prohibitions does it retain? So obviously, the basic prohibition of eating is retained. You can't eat it, okay? That's obvious. So that's number one. What about cooking them together? By biblical Basar beChalav, it says the biblical prohibition to cook them together even. But by rabbinical Basar beChalav, is there a prohibition against cooking? Can I cook chicken and milk together? So this is a debate amongst poskim. There are some, we're going to learn that there's a whole bunch of different types of rabbinical Basar beChalavs. Certain types of rabbinical Basar beChalavs still maintain a rabbinical cooking prohibition. Same way you're not allowed to rabbinically eat them, you can't rabbinically cook them. Others, however, maintain no prohibition, and when the sages prohibited them rabbinically, they only prohibited their consumption and not their cooking. Nonetheless, as we will learn when we go through the different mixtures, even in those cases that the chachamim, that the sages did not explicitly prohibit cooking them together, and only eating them together was prohibited, there is often a maras ayin prohibition against cooking them together. And we will learn about this in length. These ideas of cooking rabbinical mixtures, and when maras ayin applies to doing that, will be a bulk of discussion in the next shiur We're going to get very deep into that. It's going to take us through a lot of the material in chapter 87. That's where a lot of the lumdus and deep halachic and Talmudic analytics takes place. Benefiting. So just to summarize on the cooking, bottom line is that in essence you cannot cook rabbinical mixtures of basar beChalav. The question is it rabbinically forbidden to cook or only due to marasai? That's basically the question. We're going to go more into that in the coming halachas. Benefiting from rabbinical mixtures. So we find a machlekes amongst the poskim whether the benefit prohibition applies likewise to rabbinical basar beChalav. So can you benefit from a chicken cheese dinner? Can I feed it to my cat? So it's a machlekes. Some poskim will say it's forbidden. So is the opinion of the Rashal and the Bach. However, the Ramah and the Shulchan Aruch rules it is permitted in chapter 87:1, and so is likewise the opinion of the Shach and the Taz, and the Mechaber, and the Rambam, and the Tur. And bottom line is that they all negate the opinion of the Rashal and Bach, and that is the final halacha. The final halacha is that it is mutter, it is permitted to receive benefit from rabbinical basar beChalav, but just for your information, there are poskim who disagree. Practically, that makes no difference. There's no proper ramification in their disagreement, as we don't rule like them, and it is permitted, and there is no chumrah to be machmir, to not benefit from rabbinical basar beChalav. In chapter 39, we have some summaries of opinions regarding marasayin. We will go into that more when we enter the discussion of the different mixtures. So I'm going to skip that for now. And we'll leave off for now by the definition of mixtures are biblically forbidden. This begins entering us into the discussion of derech bishul, what type of cooking is biblically considered cooking, what type of cooking is only rabbinical, and right after that it enters into the big discussion of the various mixtures, the species of milk and the species of meat that contain a basar beChalav prohibition. I hope everybody enjoyed. You can leave your comments on the site, and we will conclude here for tonight. I wish everyone be safe and healthy in this crisis. We will daven for each other and follow the directives of the medical community. Very, very important. It's also for us to put ourselves or other people in danger.